is Syspro Analytics and some dashboards. For those that have never seen the dashboards before, they're on the Syspro 6 and so on. This will be a little bit of a revelation. For the guys that are on 6.1 and even 7, sorry, we're going to bore you to death a bit. Okay. So, we call this sort of knowledge from chaos. There are a few intelligence terms that people bandy about, and us in the IT industry are famous for having acronyms for absolutely everything. So, there's a couple that will stand out, which is OLAP, Online Analytical Processing. You'll hear me talk about OLAP cubes, and I'll explain to you what an OLAP cube is in a moment. Data warehousing, ETLs, which is extracting the data, transforming the data, and loading it into a data warehouse. Microsoft SSIS, which is what we call integration services, and KPIs, key performance indicators. What happens to my data? I've got all this information flowing through my financials, through my work in progress, through purchasing. How do I express it to the end user? What do they want to see? So typically what we have is your Syspro operational database, and we do what's called an ETL. We extract the data out of it and put it into a data warehouse. Why do we do that? Why don't we just go and hit the live server and go for it? Well, it slows the live transactions down. Okay. So if somebody's running large queries or large reports and they're hitting that main transactional database, the other users that are processing sales orders or doing stock receipts, they'll actually see a degradation in the speed of Syspro. So for those massive queries, reports, slicing and dicing of data, we actually move it into a data warehouse. What we then do is we use SQL analysis services to hold that information and present what we call an online analytical view of that data. How we express it to the end user, there's different front-end tools. Syspro has an analytics viewer, which is just a basic way to check what's in that cube. It's not designed to be a customer-facing end-user tool, far from it. Okay? It's merely for an admin person to say, yeah, it's pulling out the right figures, I'm getting the right number of job cards in there, the balance sheet looks good, hopefully. So we use a different set of front-end tools to actually do that. Who are the users of this business intelligence? Well, we find there's different levels in the business who's actually going to look at it. So we have executives and decision makers. They're looking at a very high level. They don't really care about which invoice got posted to what account. They're looking at cash flow models. They're looking at income statements, balance sheets, and performing sort of limited analysis. The sort of middle management who have to report all those stats and be responsible for them, they tend to be analysis paralysis. So they tend to have to find all the excuses of why the job cards didn't come off that metal door line, for example. So they analyse data at a much more detailed level and need to slice and dice it and say, well, what happened to the sales by geographic area or sales by type of product? Why has industrial dropped down? Okay, and so on. Information workers, they're the sort of people processing sort of transactions and so on. They need sort of static reports and sort of limited analytic power. They don't do analysis because they're only looking at their particular job function. The line workers, the guys actually scanning the barcodes and moving stock around, they don't really need analytic capabilities, but they need the business intelligence presented to them as part of their job. It should be native. So, what front-end tools do we use? Well, out there in the 6.1 Syspro community at the moment, we use dashboards. Most of the people use Excel, believe it or not, much to Chris Cheers' disgust. You have an analytic viewer. As we said, that's just to see if the data's looking right. It's definitely not a presentation tool. SharePoint services. A lot of people present it in a web format. Okay? And there are widgets which actually sit on somebody's desktop and they're designed to give specific pieces of information, like how is my bank balances today? What are my trends coming along from logistics and so on? What what makes up my data warehouse. And let's hear a lot of terms about cubes, measures, indicators, dimensions. All sounds really confusing and really complicated. And as IT people, we do that on purpose. So what do? We're actually building a cube of data. So we're looking, for example, for sales information in quantities across a time, across regions. So you're building a three-dimensional model of your data. So we're going to ask you for measures. What do you want to see? So normally that's stock on hand, turnover, month-to-date sales, year-to-date sales, profit percentages. They're normally always numbers, okay? And some measures are not what we want to add up and calculate by, but they might be dates of last shipment or quantity measures. So that's what we want to measure when we talk about measures. Key performance indicators. That differs by department. So it might be DIFOT, which is deliveries in full on time, okay, which is an Australian norm. South Africans really don't care, but Australians kind of get measured by Bunnings on their DIFOT analysis and they screw you the price. So you're a really bad supplier, but it was more for less. So KPIs will differ from business to business, and they'll differ from department to department. So when we're coming and installing analytics, we need to do a little bit of background work before you even load the software. You need to look at those measurements that you want to put down departments. What native information do you want to give to a line worker who's not really going to slice and dice data? He just wants to know, I've done 400 sales orders today and I've delivered 30 of them. Hey, that's all he wants to see. Very nice and easy. Whereas a financial director is going to have a whole bunch more KPIs. Hopefully cash flow really well. You'll hear us talk about dimensions. This is how you want to see the data. So do I want to see it by time, by geographic area, by customer, by product class? That's how I want to see the dimension. But dimensions are also made up of what we call attributes. So within time, I have a subset of year, quarter, month, day, and that could be calendar versus fiscal. Because, hey, most people have their year ends at the end of June, but then we have other people that have December year ends. So there are different dimensions to that time. So attributes could be geography, for example, so we break it down to country, down into provinces, states, cities, and so on. So that's what we term by attributes. So we have a cube of data, we have a dimension of how we want to see it, attributes of how we'd like to see it inside that. So presentation front-end tools, I can embed inside Syspro, I can have it outside of Syspro. So depending if the MD's got his laptop or his iPad, depending which he's on the plane with, if it's inside Syspro, we'll present it inside Syspro. That could be an Excel sheet, it could be a flash file, it could be one of the standard Syspro drill downs. But again, with Syspro you're limited to certain real estate and you put in your chief of KPIs in there. Dashboards came out in 6.1. I think most people, the new sites have bought it. Virtually nobody's done bugger all with it. Okay? So we're going to go through dashboards today to explain why you haven't done anything with it and what you should be doing with it. Now, dashboards is a tool that we use that is not Syspro dependent. Okay? So we have dashboards that go and reach into a payroll database. They might go and read a machine database. Okay? It's not limited to Syspro at all. Okay? And for those of you who are dealing with the Bunnings and the Officeworks and the Big W that are on SAP, this tool talks directly to SAP in real time. Okay? So you can mix their ASIC data, for example, with your forecasting data and present the two together. There's no reason why not. Any questions on that so far?
This is all dynamic, so it doesn't matter if you're outside or inside Syspro. The dynamics is still the same.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the thing we have to look at is what is the source of our data? Where do we get it from? So I'm going to run through analytics first. And this is a standard Syspro module that you can buy or have already bought, one of the two. This relies on you having installed SQL analysis services. So inside SQL, for those that are technically aligned, Syspro creates a data warehouse. So it creates an analytics master and a database per site or per company. It then relies on analysis services, so you need to have installed analysis services as well as your normal SQL. And then it creates all of those cubes, dimensions that we were just talking about. Now with Syspro you get a preset dimensions and cubes. So it doesn't stop you adding your own, but Syspro, to the kindness of our hearts, have added some standard ones. So typically Syspro feels that you're looking at the branch, the customers, fiscal periods versus calendar, general ledger, manufacturing, purchasing, suppliers, work in progress. We thought those were the sort of peanut butter spread of what we thought the dimensions would be. There is nothing stopping you adding your own. Cubes, as standard, we bunch up and cube data through that ETL process. They extract, transform, and load. So we're taking it out of line item of invoices through debtors, and we're turning it into that three-dimensional cube by time, by the attributes being quantity, profit, cost of sales, and so on, by your dimensions being geographic area, fiscal time, and so on. So that ETL process is building the cube for you. You're thinking, this all sounds so friggin' complicated. Do I really want to do this? What Syspro have done is we have created a setup routine for you that goes and creates that ETL job for you. It creates all the cubes. It creates all the dimensions. You don't have to do very much at all. So what Syspro wants you to do is we want to look at setting up an analytics server, and it's going to look for the basic information. Where is the server? What's the passwords? Is it running a port? Is it via a web service? Okay, so it will analyze what's on your server, and you merely say, I want to start it. That's it. Life is fairly easy. Which Syspro companies do you want to include? Because this tool that cubes it up not only does single company, but you can aggregate across multiple companies. So compare sales last year versus my other company sales last year. Okay, so it's not singular pieces of information. Operators, who's actually going to be able to administer this analysis server? Who's going to be able to view it? And more importantly, we have a whole bunch of standard templates, which are the KPIs. So go on product profitability, sales by customer, by debtors age analysis. Okay. So whatever KPIs we can actually build and create new ones and assign them to certain operators. If we look at the viewer, there you can see my templates and my KPIs. So I might want to look at my current aging. And there we go. This is the analytics viewer. It is not a presentation tool. It's merely to check the fact that, hey, my cube is working, and let me see if I can get my dimensions that I asked for. So we can run multiple companies, single companies, and we split it into almost like a pivot table for you to have a play with. So if you right-click, you can look at the field list that is in those dimensions. So these are the preset ones from Syspro. You can add your own. Okay? So very simple to do. It's a SQL task to add your extra dimensions. Very simple. But we think we've covered most of them. So if I'm looking at my age analysis, and Edgar wants to know which salesperson is actually contributing most of that 30, 60, 90, we can add the salesperson in. And you can drag them around. So I don't want it by customer. Show me by salesperson which customers are making up that value. Okay. So they are into moving those dimensions around. Or I want to put the branch in, but I want it to act as a filter. So I can say, do I want all branches? No. I only want to see the north branch or the east branch. I can say, no, only show me the north versus the south. Then put it out of the way. And I can check whether my figures are correct. If I want to, I can add more figures. So I want to add the original invoice value. See how they're doing, how they're paying. No, they're paying bloody thing. So Syspro has built those templates, the cubes, the dimensions. So all you have to do is really familiarize yourself with the language and say, okay, I know what they're talking about. An ETL, I'm getting my data out. I'm putting in this big cube. How do I want to slice and dice it? Fairly simple way to do it. And those cubes are, those templates should I say, are all the KPIs that I want. What you also have the ability to do is skip the KPIs and go directly to the module cube itself. So if I wanted to go to work in progress, for example, you'll see the screen goes blank. Okay, we had to put one field in there to make it actually come up. But now we're into dropping the field list and say, I want to look at it by the number of hours it took on the job. I want to know, and there's lots of fields in here, which job number it was, what the job description was, show me by stop code. So you can actually go a little bit nuts. I'm moving all of these around into rows and columns and filtering it out. So you can go directly to the entire cube itself, but as you can see, life gets a bit messy when you do that. Okay. Typically, if you want to access the cube yourself, you'll talk to your IT people and say, I want a cube that does this.
Because this is accessible from SQL.
Yes. Correct. So the viewer is only a little tool to actually see if my data is actually looking somewhere near correct. Okay, so any questions on the analytics, the terminology?
How do you make it look pretty in Excel?
Right, we'll come to that one. So, pretty in Excel, whatever example.
One of the problems you have is you have a lot of columns that are hidden, that come through in Excel. That's what I mean by pretty.
So, in Excel, there is a new function called Powerpivot. Okay, so you have to download it and add it. It doesn't come with Excel as standard. Okay, just go to Microsoft and download it. That allows you to then formulate your data into slider bars, pivots, and you drag and drop your columns on. So even if it comes with 1,000 columns inside that cube, when you drag and drop the items that you want and lay it out into, I want a slider bar, I want rows and power pivots. Anytime that you want to go to the data, it's going to go back to that cube file and go and get the new snapshot of data. Now you can say, I want to refresh that every 5 minutes, I want it every hour, or I'll just do it on demand. And typically what our customers do is they have all of their normal stats, and obviously then go into using normal Excel functions. I want to highlight by colour, I want to show the top 10 green conditional formatting. But Powerpivot does give you a lot of those toys to play with.
If you're doing standard Excel,
it's a bit of a bitch.
Yeah.
To be quite honest.
It's ugly.
Yeah. So that's the kind of presentation that's a customer's data. I shouldn't really be showing you the data, but you won't know the customer name. So that's how we present it for them.
What's the difference between the got the analysis server connection, and you also got the cube file it was trying to connect.
Yep.
What's the right?
The right way is to go to your pre-built cube. If you go to the analysis, you're going to that raw cube. So going to the profiler and the viewer, it's easier to access these because you've already decided what the fields are going to be inside that view, if you will. So if you go directly to the cube, you're pulling out huge chunks of raw data. So, because there's no filter on there, if you've got 20 years of history, it's going to go and get 20 years of history, whereas these can actually be filtered. So those KPIs are actually mini SQL statements in effect. Okay, so that's one way of analysing data, and that's for people who've got big data. So I heard Kevin talk about big data yesterday. That's where we don't want people hitting a live server with all those queries. We'd rather let them hit the data warehouse because they can't break anything. Okay, if the data head warehouse goes down because somebody's locked a SQL query on it for 10 days, I really couldn't give a rat's. Next time it comes up, it'll sync itself with the ETL process, and everybody's happy. But meanwhile, back at the farm, everybody's doing their normal job on the live database.
Well, you said refresh every half hour or so, but generally the jobs run at night though, isn't it, for the cube to get
It
the data?
depends on the company. Some of the guys that are in pure retail don't want to wait to the end of the day. They want to snap every 15 minutes. So then the server's actually doing a lot more work, dragging the live transactions as they happen and putting them inside the queue. You need to have a seriously grunt server to make that happen.
Ours takes about 50 minutes to run as it is, I think. So.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty good.
So depends on the environment. Most of our customers, every day is good enough for data warehousing.
Huh?
If we go to Syspro 7, Global Seafoods here. Oh, there they go at the back. Okay. In 6.1 and upwards, and in 7, you're able to embed what we call dashboards. So this little button here says I want to create a new customized pane, and the choices that I have is, besides all of Syspro's normal PDF viewer and forms and so on, and I'm going to create an executive dashboard. Takes a little while to refresh. These are all the standard ones that are in Syspro. So we can have a look at a preview. And it'll go off and go and look at the dashboard that Syspro has pre-built. You can then embed that, so save and exit, and it will embed it inside Syspro. So you can do that with a few different kinds of dashboards. You can add your own in here. So you'll see I've got one of those. It's a very slow connection today. This one's actually linked to Google Maps, so it takes the default analysis and goes and maps it. She's not playing ball today. 3G in here is not good. Yeah, they don't run cable again. So if we have a dashboard, we can save and exit, and that will embed it inside Syspro. And you can put that anywhere you like. You can put it inside a customer pane, into a supplier pane, wherever you like. So if you go to a supplier query, for example, choose a supplier, then I might have one that goes and does a ratio analysis on that supplier. It tells me what over the last 2 years, what that variance has been on price, age, what's the quantity ordered variance look like, the price received, order aging. So you can embed these dashboards any way you like inside Syspro. And I said that's in 6.1, sorry, limited into 6. Really sorry. Don't upgrade. This was even if you don't have the module, so you can still embed the standard ones. Okay, so that's dashboards inside Syspro. What do we do with them outside of Syspro? Well, if in a Windows 7 environment, we need to run something called sidebar.exe. It normally starts up when you run your PC, and it will enable the Windows 7 gadgets. So you've got your normal Windows 7. Yes, I know I'm not connected. And it will now place those gadgets onto your desktop. So I can, even without Syspro being loaded on my machine, I can have these gadgets displayed. So I can actually email to one of my customers and say, there you go. There's my default. 0, but it's close. And with security credentials, being credentials you provide, he connects to your web service, logs in with his operator code into that company with his passwords, and it will let him in. But it will be restricted to just the security access that you give him inside Syspro. But he doesn't even have Syspro on his machine. Okay. Very, very easy. You can make dashboards do all kinds of things. So I could actually ask it to map geographically, and as I hover over the different areas, it'll tell me what my sales are in those particular areas. I don't know whether we can see the word on that one, but it says warehousing. I'm going to put it into customer satisfaction. What's my on-time delivery? Okay. So you can nest dashboards together. Okay. So here I've got 3 dashboards expressed as one, with a live ticker table. So as people are invoicing in Syspro, it's actually changing the figures in real time. Okay. So I can get onto the phone to Michael and say, why has those credit notes just come through? I can ask it to go and do several things. I can ask it to go and compare my year-to-dates, tell me my product share markets, show me what's actually selling in the different areas. And
is that querying the cube, Chris, or is that querying the live data?
This one's querying live data.
How is it on speed?
It's actually not bad. But it depends on your refresh rate.
Yeah.
So it's pretty okay. So these guys, which is a very large customer to say the least, they got 100 sites. And you can have them where they're actually interactive dashboards. I might be looking at my income statement, and what I have to do to get back into profit. Well, we've got to tell Paul Kelly that he's got to get at least 36% increase, otherwise, guess what? His expenses start to go. So they're not just flat panels of information, you can actually interact with them as well. Now there are other things that you can do. I hope this works. Oh, come on. I have network. No, it's not my Syspro connection. Okay. If you register with Google, you get something called a developer Google ID, which allows you to geolocate things using the dashboards. So then you can write a dashboard that goes and takes all of your customers and plots them on an Australian map, for example. Okay. We've got it so far, it goes down to satellite view. We can't get Street View working yet. Okay, for some reason it's a bit buggy, but at least takes you down to seeing what the front door looks like. That's about it. So how do we do all of that? Okay, well, Syspro, you can buy the dashboard module, and that comes with a product called Excelsius. And it's written by SAP, because they bought business objects. Just put the SAP logo in front of it. And it gives you a tool. And how this tool works is it has a canvas. And guess what? The heart of its engine, where it gets its data from, is Excel. So if you're Excel friendly, okay, we're in. Okay? So there is no reason to be afraid of it. Okay? It might look like a monster. It really isn't. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible by giving, on the left-hand side, a whole bunch of stuff pre-built. So it might be a gauge that I want, and I just pick it up, and I drag it and drop it. I don't have to draw the gauge. I don't have to worry about how it moves. I give it a title, and I say to Excel, where is the data coming from? So I just bind it to the sheet. You're thinking, freaking hell, this is simple. Why haven't I done this before? The tricky part is, where does that data come from? Okay. Up the top, there's an ubiquitous little button called Connections. It will talk to virtually anything. So the standard Syspro dashboards are doing what we call an XML map. Okay. It's quite technical. It's a real pain to build. Okay. But that's the way that Syspro did it, so they can consume business objects. You don't have to do that. The simplest way is you've got a crystal report. Crystal report's already there with all the headings. I just want it in a nice, smart dashboard. So you just tell Excel to consume that crystal report. And it asks you what the report name is, what's the rows and headers in the report, where's the data going to come from. Simple stuff. You can even make it consume SQL reporting services reports, or you can actually connect to a web connection. And it'll ask you for a URL. And you're thinking, oh man, this is getting more complicated by the second. So what you're able to do is, for those Syspro resellers in the room, is you're able to go to your internet folder. You're able to look at a config and write a little bit of script. All this is doing is connecting to a SQL server and getting out of my customer file the year-to-date sales, the account number from our customer BAL table. Okay. The rest of it, all of this, stays exactly the same. This is the piece that changes. It's just a SQL statement. It's a little bit more complicated than Excel, but that writes a web service, and you just connect to that web service. It will give you account number, year-to-date sales, and so on. So when people say, I've got to write a web service, please believe me, it's 10 seconds worth of work. I might bill you for that work. Lowest resolution. So connecting to the data is pretty simple. Even if you want to go to SAP, SAP will give you a connection string, a password, a login, just like we do for a Syspro site, and you can go get into a SAP site. There are tutorials, so on the web there is currently about 700,000 videos which take you through step by step. Click on this button, click on this one, go to it's idiot proof, even I can do it. There are templates, so if I want to look at an income statement, for example, most of the time what we find is it's the imagination of how do I want to lay it out, how pretty do I want to make it. I know what the data is because it's an income statement, but how pretty do you want to make it? So on the canvas you have slider bars, you have selectors and things that you can drop on, and again it's just on the right hand side here setting how they behave.
This is all part of Excel.
All part of Excelsius. Now what it does, it generates something called a Swift file, which is a flash file. Which means it can be viewed in Internet Explorer, Firefox, and you can actually put it into the Syspro dashboard directory and call it up inside standard Syspro. And again, all of the way that the slider bars work is all native to Excelsius. You don't have to worry about that. You just say, I want a slider bar and I want to put it on net sales. Done. So even Wayne could use it. Put it that way. Now, these are all Windows 7 gadgets. And as you know, Windows 7 is dying a death, slowly but surely. Windows 8 and even 8.1 is now coming off. Microsoft, in their infinite wisdom, decided they're going to kill off gadgets. Okay. So, stay on Windows 7 for as long as you can, because your gadgets will stay there. You can send them to your suppliers, to your customers, and so on.
You could run the Windows 7 gadgets on that.
With some cracks.
Running this hardphone.
Yeah.
Just run this hardphone.
But, now that we're moving into a mobile world, it now has to be device independent. Android doesn't have Windows 8 gadgets or Windows 7 gadgets. How the hell do I move it around? So, in Excelsius, you have the ability to publish it to a Swift file, which is your normal Syspro dashboard method, but you can also publish it to Adobe Air, which is device independent, and it's free. Okay. But you do need quite a bit of setup. There is a certificate you have to set up on your machine. You have to download Adobe Air and then export it. The nice thing is, once you've exported it, the person receiving the dashboard doesn't need Adobe, don't need Syspro, okay? Don't need the certificate, don't need anything. You just send them the package. So the package will actually install itself as an exe. Off it goes. And it will wrap up the flash file and set itself as an executable. But there is a little technical setup that your Syspro dealer or Syspro person will have to usually help you with. It's about 2 pages of A4 to set your machine to be able to build Air components. And that makes it device independent, and they sit like a normal Windows gadget on any version of Windows, Adobe, Android, Google, and so on.
Does that have security? What's the security on that then, though, Chris? Is it?
Security is built inside the Swift file because it's compiled.
So if someone else got that Swift file, they could access it, or?
They'd have to have your, when we build your certificate for Adobe, you can put in time bombs in there, you can put in security into that certificate, and so on. So you can say it can only be run on this IP gateway, it can only be run on this, so you can set a whole bunch of parameters inside that package. You can also export it to a web page. You can put it inside a PowerPoint. So when you're giving your presentation to Chris, you can say, look, there's all the dashboards and they're interactive inside your PowerPoint. As long as you're on the net, that is. So there's no reason to be afraid of dashboards. At the heart of it is an Excel spreadsheet. That's all it is. So if you can work Excel with ranges and formulas, you can build a dashboard. And if you don't want to do it, I'm sure your resellers will more than happily do it for you for a minimal fee. Okay, so that's gadgets in a nutshell, analytics in a nutshell. There is nothing to be afraid of. The acronyms are fairly simple. They're industry standard as long as you can get around it.
What's the Excel component?
It's called Powerpivot. Powerpivot. It's just now. Okay.